Preface. Ethereal Hollywood is a world reconfigured from the golden age of Hollywood, where the legendary stars are not just memories, but immortal archetypes, still living in their own parallel alternative reality. Familiar history is not duplicated but flexible and constantly revisioning itself along diverse pathways. Time and space are also more fluid and less binding. And what has been called magic works in odd and unusual ways, producing scenarios from the silly to the surreal. And since these stories are in an alternative world or dimension, there are variances from real-world facts, such as the relationship between characters, studios, events. This is a fluid world where history flows in unexpected directions. These are audiobooks with imagery synced to the narrative as much as possible, serving as quasi-storyboards to give a rough visual dimension to the stories. Rio Magnifico, 3 cast Soaring in Flight. Book 15 of the Ethereal Hollywood series. By Arnold Kalnitsky. Early for the carnival. Carmen Miranda's sequins flashed under the studio lights, her turban trembling with fruit. Ginger Rogers blinked, her champagne laughter dying mid-bubble. Fred Astaire's polished shoe paused mid-tap. The air still shimmered where the vortex had spat them out. Carmen, Don Ameche, Alice Faye, onto the Flying Down to Rio set. Film, That Night in Rio. Don Ameche offered, smoothing his lapel. His gaze drifted past Jean Raymond's dance.Dolores de Rio's Bellina. Though your sugarloaf backdrop puts ours to shame. Alice Faye's golden hair gleamed as she stared at Ginger. You're magnificent, she breathed. Director Thornton snatched his dropped megaphone, face flushed. Studio executives huddled nearby, whispering frantically. One threw his hands up, 3 casts. The publicity alone, before nodding vigorously. Thornton cleared his throat. Unplanned merger. Roger and Honey's story now includes Baron Duarte's impersonator, Larry Martin. He gestured at Don Ameche, Alice's siren charm, and Carmen's everything. Script pages fluttered to the floor like startled birds. Fred Astaire extended a hand to Alice Faye, his grin effortless. More dancers, Ginger, he murmured. Alice took his hand, blushing slightly. Ginger Rogers smiled warmly, though her eyes narrowed as Don Ameche's Larry Martin leaned close to Dolores del Rio's Bellina, murmuring something that made her laugh. Jean Raymond's Roger stiffened, his easy charm faltering. Raoul Roulien's fiery tango partner scowled, forgotten. Suddenly, the air crackled, a sharp, operatic trumpet blast echoed. Jane Powell materialized mid-step on the gangplank of a Phantom Ocean liner, and Sothern clutching her arm, Barry Sullivan steadying them both. Nancy goes to Rio. Jane chirped, oblivious. And Sothern scanned the glittering chaos, samba costumes, airplane props, Carmen's fruit-laden turban. Darling, she sighed, this detour exceeds our itinerary. Barry Sullivan's gaze swept the room, lingering on Ginger, then Dolores. Thornton's script supervisor fainted softly into a pile of ostrich feathers. The studio head beamed, jigging on the spot. 3 for 1. Write it, Thornton bellowed. Writers scrambled, gulping coffee. The narrative shifted. Jane Powell's Nancy, an aspiring singer, idolized Ginger's Honey Hale. Barry Sullivan's newspaper magnate sparked interest in Ann Sothern's poised matron. Roger's rivalry with Larry Martin and Raoul's fiancée intensified over Bellina. Alice Faye watched Roger, a thoughtful tilt to her head. Carmen Miranda seized Don Ameche's hand, already humming a samba beat. Vamos Dankar. Chaos became choreography. Rehearsals blurred films. Julio taught Nancy a bossa nova step near papier-mâché sugarloaf. While Larry Martin borrowed Baron Duarte's yacht props to serenade Bellina, only for Raoul to intercept him mid-croon. Fred adjusted Alice Faye's frame during a waltz run-through. Eyes on the horizon, darling, he murmured. Like flying. Ginger observed, a wry smile playing on her lips as Barry Sullivan offered her a cigarette. Quite the menagerie, he remarked. She exhaled smoke. Wait for the airplane number. The airplane sequence defied physics. 100 chorus girls, shimmering in near-nude sequins, balanced on biplane wings over Guanabara Bay at dusk. Fred conducted from below, Jane's soprano soared with Carmen's staccato bursts. Julio and Larry called a truce, gaping upward. Bellina clasped her hands, breathless. Madness, whispered Ann Sothern. Barry Sullivan lit another cigarette, eyes crinkling. Genius. Then, the karaoke. Carnival exploded on set. Fred and Ginger led, steps razor sharp. Carmen dragged Raoul into a spin, fruit turban wobbling perilously. Alice and Julio swayed, her cheek resting on his shoulder. Jane and Barry improvised a lively jitterbug. Even Thornton danced, megaphone abandoned. Don Ameche swept Dolores into a tango, whispering lyrics from that night in Rio. Jean Raymond cut in smoothly. My turn, Baron. Laughter rang. Confetti rained. The music fused 3 films into one relentless, joyous rhythm. No one questioned the magic anymore. They danced it. Carmen Miranda caught Jane Powell's hand mid-spin. Sing with me, Pequeña. Jane hesitated, then matched Carmen's rapid Portuguese verse. Their voices, bell-clear soprano and earthy contralto, twined unexpectedly. Ann Sothern tapped Barry Sullivan's arm. She sounds like her father's cousin, that soprano from Sicily. Barry chuckled. Rio breeds surprises. Nearby, Ginger Rogers watched Fred Astaire effortlessly guide Alice Faye through a complex turn. He envisions everyone flying, Ginger murmured. Don Ameche overheard, flashing a grin. Isn't that the point? The studio commissary became their sanctuary. Overstrong coffee sweetened with gritty palm sugar, alliances formed. Alice Faye confessed her fascination with Rogers' quiet intensity to Dolores del Rio. He reminds me of home, she sighed. Dolores smiled knowingly. He has that effect. Barry Sullivan shared Havana cigarillos with Raoul Roulien, discussing Argentine polo ponies. Thornton scribbled notes on napkins. More, he'd mutter. More everything. Carmen Miranda distributed sticky guava pastries. Energy, she commanded. Jane Powell practiced scales between bites. Reality settled like glitter after a parade. The final scene wrapped at dawn. Exhausted, radiant, they gathered on the empty soundstage, Fred polishing his shoes, Ginger massaging her feet, Carmen adjusting her turban one last time. Jane Powell hummed a fragment of melody. What now? She whispered. Fred Astaire stood, offering his hand to Ginger. We fly, he said simply. As they walked out, the first rays of sun hit the abandoned fruit basket on Carmen's chair, making the wax bananas gleam like gold. Rio awaited. Thornton clutched the finished film canisters like holy relics. The premiere loomed. Doubt not him. Had they woven madness into magic? Studio executives paced, muttering about budgets ballooned like carnival floats. 3 films worth of stars, one groaned. 3 films worth of paychecks. Thornton silenced him with a glare. It's not 3 films. It's 1. Rio Magnifico. The name stuck. Posters bloomed across Hollywood. A dizzying collage of faces mid-dance, wings of biplanes slicing the background. Opening night. The Egyptian theater pulsed with anticipation thicker than Rio humidity. Klieg lights cut the sky. Fans screamed names. Fred. Ginger. Carmen. Jane. Inside, velvet seats. Held royalty, studio moguls, rival stars, critics clutching notebooks like shields. The lights dimmed. Silence. Then, the first blast of samba rattled the speakers. Sugarloaf Mountain filled the screen. Gasps rippled. Then laughter. Then pure, unadulterated awe. The airplane sequence drew screams. The karaoke had people tapping feet in the aisles. When Jane Powell's voice soared with Carmen's, a woman near the front wept openly. Midway through Julio's heartfelt declaration to Bellina, Don Ameche's Larry Martin leaned in to interrupt, and the projector bulb blew. Darkness. Panic fluttered. Before chaos could erupt, A pure, clear soprano pierced the blackness, Jane Powell, standing in her seat, singing the film's love theme a cappella. Fred Astaire, somewhere in the dark, started tapping a rhythm on the armrest. Ginger Rogers joined him, a soft shuffle. Then Carmen's unmistakable laugh rang out, followed by her rapid-fire Portuguese verse. The entire audience, stars and patrons alike, began clapping, stomping, singing fragments they remembered. The screen stayed dark, but Rio lived, magnificent and utterly real, in that shared, spontaneous carnival of sound. The film hadn't just premiered, it had become them. Backstage, Thornton wept openly into his bow tie. Studio executives exchanged stunned looks, not at the standing ovation, but at the sheer, unplanned perfection of the projector failure. "We'll cut the bulb scene into the final reel," one murmured, scribbling frantically. "Call it, the audience karaoke." Barry Sullivan lit a cigarillo near the fire exit, smoke curling into the alley. "Never seen anything like it," he told Sothern, who nodded, eyes bright. "They didn't watch a movie, Thornton. They lived it." Carmen Miranda swept Jane Powell into a crushing hug near the concession stand. "You saved it, Pequeña." Jane flushed, still trembling. "I just sang." Fred Astaire offered Ginger his arm, nodding toward the roaring crowd visible through the curtains. "Shall we?" Ginger adjusted a diamond clip. "After that, they'll expect wings." They stepped into the spotlight, not for a bow, but for an impromptu soft shoe to the lingering hum of the audience's rhythm. Dolores del Rio watched, serene, as Jean Raymond whispered something that made her laugh, a real laugh, caught by a newsreel camera. Outside, dawn streaked the sky pink over Hollywood Boulevard. Taxis idled, engines purring. Alice Faye paused beneath the marquee, its bulbs spelling Rio Magnifico in blazing gold. She touched Roger's arm. "Do you think it could happen again?" Jean Raymond smiled, weary but radiant. "Rio's full of magic, Alice. But tonight," he glanced back at the theater, still vibrating with song. "Tonight, we brought it here." They walked toward the waiting cars, leaving the echoes of samba hanging in the cool morning air like a promise. The reviews hit like a hurricane. Luella Parsons gushed, "A Technicolor tornado." Astaire defies physics, Miranda explodes with joy, Powell's voice is angelic. But one critic sneered, "A glorified potboiler stew, overstuffed and undercooked." Thornton crumpled the paper, tossing it into his wastebasket where it landed atop an ash leaf-shaped rejection slip for another script. "Fools," he muttered, then grinned. Box office receipts, telephoned in hourly, told the true story. Lines snaked around blocks, tickets sold out for weeks. The studio head sent champagne, cases of it.